Welcome to the Mindful Momentum Leadership Podcast, where we explore the art and science of leading with courage, compassion, candor, and mindfulness. I'm your host, Anu Arora. Today, I'm joined by someone whose work I deeply admire, Tissa Richards. Tissa is an award winning author, speaker, and executive coach who helps C suite leaders, founders, and boards navigate high stake decisions with clarity and confidence. Her new book, Rethinking Resilience, Fueling Your Competitive Advantage, redefines resilience not as something you summon in a crisis, but a daily learnable skill that powers performance and leadership. She calls it intentional resilience. And I can't wait to dive into what that really means. Tissa, welcome to the podcast.
It's so good to be here and it's so good to see you, Anu. I've been looking forward to this and it's been too long since I've seen you.
It's fun, isn't it?
I
Even if it's
know.
on Zoom, I will
I
just feel the
know.
same energy that I felt when we were in person together in Lambertville. So
Yes.
amazing. So my first question is about the book itself. And I saw it opens with a bold question. What if everything we have been told about resilience is wrong? Let's
Yeah,
start there. What's wrong with the traditional definition of resilience? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Isn't that what it is?
totally. So here's the book. It's out. It's so fun to hold it in my hand. And yeah, you're right. I do think that everything we've been told is wrong and it's outdated. And yeah, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? But think about what the dictionary tells us that resilience means. It means you go through something difficult or traumatic, you eventually adapt and overcome it, and then you bounce back, right? That's what resilience is. It's about bouncing back to your regular life or to business as usual. But I think that what that does is think about the very phrasing you used. What doesn't kill you makes you
Mm,
stronger. That is survival mode thinking, right? It positions that you have to always be in this reactive crisis mode thinking.
mm,
And
mm.
so I think that it does a couple things. For one thing, it doesn't put you in sort of a readiness or preparedness kind of thinking. But it also, I think, makes it very easy to feel like you're failing at resilience. Because what if you don't bounce back to the right thing? Or um, what if the world gets harder and harder, which it is? What if we're always living in uncertainty and disruption, which we are? Um, we're not rubber balls. We can't keep bouncing back. Eventually, we're not bouncy anymore.
Mm,
So
mm.
I started thinking, why are we always in this like survival mode, reactive crisis? It also doesn't prepare us for the other side of challenge, which is opportunity. And so I just thought, why are we in survival mode? Why aren't we thinking of this as a preparedness, readiness muscle that you're always ready? And that resilience is actually, to me, it's intentional, it's muscle. So you're ready for anything, not just a crisis.
Yeah, yeah. And, when we were together in Lambertville and I'd heard your keynote speech around it, and I did quite a few things which kind of spoke to me very, very closely because we saw growing up, people telling you, you better than this, or you can push through this. And I particularly remember my father's death when I was 21 old, and I went back home. I was studying then, and we'll have people come and we were grieving. As I was grieving, they're like, oh, you are young, you will get through this, you are strong, you'll get through this. And when you were talking in Lambertville, I'm like, what if there was more space for me to just be, and somebody was there holding my hand to help through this and say, yes, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel weak. It's okay to feel that you have lost something, because you've lost a parent. And I just, it had moved me greatly. And so that is another reason I'm really delighted you're here and talking to our
Yeah.
listeners as well.
Yeah. And then what if you also had all through your life been building a muscle so that it doesn't negate the fact that you're grieving. It doesn't negate the fact that that's a hard situation, but you also had more tools to sort of deal with it ahead of time. Does that make sense? It doesn't
It
make a
does,
difficult
because the
situation.
only tool I was being offered was to push through this. And I did. I did push through this. I thought I had to take that responsibility for my mom. And I remember just doing everything that was needed in that time, with all the paperwork and all the hassle around. My father hadn't left a will, so it made things extremely difficult. But I continue to feel it for years to come. It was that healing process took so long. If I had tools, and yes,
Yeah.
the
And
way
it's
to build this.
interesting, right? Because I feel like so another core tenet of the book is this idea that I think that way of thinking and of telling people that's where things happen to you, right?
Mm.
But I don't think anything actually happens to us. I think that everything in life happens through us. And we have, or we should have, a lot of agency and choice and empowerment in what happens through us and how we process it and what we're choosing to learn through situations. I think about the hardest things that have ever happened to me, and they didn't happen to me. They
Mhm.
happened, everything that came out of them happened through me. I made decisions about what I was going to learn, how I was going to frame them, how I was going to grow from them. And so this becomes it's a reframing and a shifting of, I don't want to use the word victim mentality, but I think so many times, think about teams, think about anything where you're like, why is this happening to me? What are we going to do about this? As opposed to, okay, what is this an opportunity for? Or, what are we going to do with this? And so I think that's a really big mindset shift in the book too, of like, okay, is growth going to happen from this? Is learning, is adaptability, is innovation, whatever it is, nothing happens to us.
Such a,
Everything happens through us, but you got to kind of have those muscles in place, right?
I think that's such a powerful reframe. It's not an ordinary reframe. It's a huge mind shift. Is
Yeah.
that what you call intentional resilience in your book?
Yes. Yeah. So instead of reactive resilience, it's intentional.
Yeah, yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about it? How to develop that muscle, if we can start, moving towards that.
Yeah, yeah. So I like to think of it as like, think about driving, right? So there's a reason we all really dislike, well, I don't know anyone that likes this, but being behind a student driver, right? Because when you're first learning to drive, everything is very conscious. So you're like hyper aware of where your hands are, what your eyes are seeing, and that's why they're so slow and methodical, right? And it's tiring. But after just a few years of driving, you just internalize all the mechanics of driving. It just becomes a muscle memory. That's why you can suddenly end up somewhere and you're like, oh, I don't even quite know what route I took to get here, right? You just internalize all those micro moments and those physical elements and the mental ones of driving. And I think you can do the exact same thing to build the muscle of intentional resilience. I like to think of it as in the book, I talk about it as micro moments.
Mm-hmm.
This is not eating the whole elephant at
Mm.
once. You can do this in the tiniest little ways because tiny things build muscle. Tiny things can move a mountain eventually, right? So I think of it as just what are the ways that you can start to do little things that will become a habit that will build a muscle so you can internalize the mechanics of shifting your resilience from one kind to the other. We all have resilience already. We're
Mm-hmm.
alive, we're resilient. It's just how are we shifting it upstream like this? So just simple things. And there's a lot of elements, I think. There's like what kinds of how curious are you? What kinds of questions are you asking? How are you communicating? What kind of clarity do you have? How are you making decisions based on what values or what are your convictions? even something like, I don't think resilience is not about just you. It's about the whole community, right? It's a team sport. So there's just these different elements. And then which of those elements are you going to lean into in little tiny ways?
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
little micro moments that you can lean in. And they're not huge, they don't take a lot of time.
Mhm.
There's just lots of examples that we could dive into that you could start to do this in two
Right.
minutes a day. Yeah.
Right away. As you were saying this, I said, oh, what if I'm more curious? What does it look like? What question can I ask when I feel like somebody's, upset me or somebody's jolted me or got me off balance, created stress, anxiety? How can I get a little bit more curious about that?
Yeah. So just think about like when I think about the teams that I work with, so often, right, there's like, well, why did this happen? Why did
Mm,
this happen to us? As opposed to, okay, what what can this mean? What are
mm,
the implications? So we're not asking the why, we're not asking the to you. We're
mm,
asking, okay, what opportunities can this be? Which of my values is this maybe challenging? Why is this frustrating me? So you're sort of doing like a little bit of like a self-examination. And you're also, what you're doing is also giving yourself a little pause, right? Because the
mm,
pause is what helps us shift from a reaction to a response. We're kind of like just de-escalating that kind of visceral reaction, which causes burnout and all that cascade of hormones that, can lead to the adrenaline surge. So any kind of curiosity where you're saying, okay, why is this stressful? Why does this feel stressful? Why does this feel urgent? Cadence is another one. Like, why
mm,
is it that we always feel so compelled to react quickly? Not
mm,
everything is urgent. A lot of things are noise. So I think there's that curiosity of like, I'll frequently respond to someone and say, got your message. You will get a response from me in the next, you will get a response. Sometimes I don't even want to commit to a time,
mm.
right? You will hear back from me.
Yeah.
Now I've kind of bought myself this like space. Those are little micro moments.
Yeah, yeah, and that pause creates a sense of relief.
Yeah. And control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can see that in today's world, with the onslaught of AI, which is here and is shifting things in such a big
And
way.
so fast, right?
Yeah, yeah, and this becomes even more important that we are redefining resilience. Also, are we are rebuilding that resilience through these you know, you call them
Moments, micro
moments,
moments. Yeah.
micro moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we look at all the changes coming in what ways do you think this kind of muscle can help with all what's happening in the world now? Everything seems
Yeah.
topsy-turvy.
Totally. I think when it does, again, like you said, it gives you that ability to pause. It also gives you the foundation. So I really think it's important. This is what I call the fallacy of resilience in high stakes situations. So whenever I ask people, all right, how are you going to handle things when the stakes get high? People usually say, "Oh, don't worry, I got it under control." But
Mm,
ask yourself, why do we wear seatbelts? Why do we
mm,
take life jackets on a boat when it's sunny? Is because it's too late to scramble for them when things get a little hairy, right? So we
mm,
put them on proactively, prophylactically, actually. And so it's the same thing by knowing your values. It's the same thing by building this muscle. It's too late to scramble when the stakes get high. So you've got to know way ahead of time what values you're going to use to make a decision. You've got to have the clarity. You've got to have that conviction. And so when people say to me, "Oh, don't worry, I know, but when the stakes are high, I'll figure it out." It's too late. Your resilience will atrophy, just like a muscle.
yeah.
So figuring it out now, knowing your foundation, knowing your non-negotiables. This is not soft and squishy. This is this is like table stakes, right? But
Mm,
doing it now, building that muscle, even something as simple as like, what are your core three values?
mhm,
If you can't name them now, you're not going to be able to grab them
mm,
when you're presented with a really high stakes situation.
mm,
That
mm,
gets really tiring. Make it a muscle memory now so that when you need it, you already have that seatbelt on, you know? And it's going, just think about like how it's how does this tie into AI and how fast things are changing? The world is changing really fast. So you need some ballast so that you're not flipping around in that turbulence.
Yeah. And as you're talking about this, I'm also thinking of teams. You and I both work with teams. We do team coaching, and teams are actually feeling the brunt of this even more than individuals are. And when you are explaining about values, I would believe that it's the same work with the teams.
Absolutely. Yeah,
What's our collective purpose and our values, and how do we uh, decide them now, not when the difficulty or the big change arises.
totally. Absolutely. And I think this is really around clarity. So there's in the book, I talk about what's what I call the flywheel of intentional resilience. And it's elements that I see in common in leaders and teams that I feel like really represent intentional resilience.
Mm.
And some of those things, to your point, are clarity. So they have clarity on what the priorities are. And it might shift, but that's okay. They're very good at just communicating it. Communication's another one. They
Mm.
have conviction. They know, like, once they're all aligned, that's not gonna budge. Now it can change, but once they're all aligned, now they're all going in the same direction. Um, Communication's so key, right? So many times we
Mm.
think we're saying something, and I do this a lot in workshops. I'll go in and I'll listen to a presentation from, let's say, the CEO or the EVP, and they think they've told everybody, here's our big priorities. And then I'll poll the people in the audience. And so maybe the CEO thinks they've said, here's our top three priorities for the
Mm.
year, but they've said so much else that I
Mm.
hear from other, I'll get 20 answers from the audience. And I go, we have a really big misalignment problem. And now, what is everybody going to go and prioritize? You think they're all going to work on what you said. They all heard 20 different things.
Mm.
That's a
Mm.
direct cause of burnout because everybody's everybody's got the best intentions, but
Mm.
they think they're doing what they heard. And so, yeah, to your point, alignment and such clarity and crisp communication, this all directly links to resilience.
Mm. Mm. You have such wonderful frameworks and other things that you mentioned in your book. You also just mentioned the flywheel. What is that?
Yeah, so I work with just like you, I work with so many great leaders and teams, and I started to just see these commonalities that I thought these are areas we can strengthen, and there are things I see in common. So, and I call it a flywheel because I don't think it's a linear process to build
Mm.
resilience. I think there's some people that have certain areas that are really great and some that they can strengthen. And so it was a good way to structure the book for one thing, but also to sort of say you can start anywhere. Again,
Mm.
little micro moments. You can figure out your cadence, you can figure out how you're communicating, and just build micro moments around these different elements, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to, you talk about resilience isn't about pushing through, it's about staying anchored in who you are. How do leaders lead with that without, losing themselves?
Yeah, this is really important, right? But this you have to know who you are in order to stay who
Mm.
you are. Um, I think we throw the word authenticity around a lot, but
Mm.
it's really important. I think a lot of this is about modeling. So I think the role of a leader is to model. There's
Mm.
also to decenter yourself.
Mm.
So it can be something simple, a really simple micro moment is don't lead the meeting, right? Like step back. Now you're doing a couple things in parallel. You're empowering your team. You're also giving yourself a little more space because you're not always holding the brunt of all the responsibility. Um, but it's interesting because it's so easy to burn out, but not if you remember that this is a team sport. Nobody does this on their own, you know?
Mm.
So I think you got to know who you are, trust your team. But if you're not modeling these things and building the capabilities into your team, then you'll never be able to step back a little bit.
Mm. Makes sense. We're going to come back more on the book, but I want to talk a little bit about you. What inspired you to be on this journey? Why did you write this book? What's your personal motivation in it?
Yeah, well, and Anu, you know some of this story, right? I mean, so as a recovering tech founder, and I say that because, you know, it's been a long road to recover. So I founded and scaled a software startup, cybersecurity company, and then I had to make the very difficult decision to shut it down, to stay aligned with my values. We were presented with a situation that I think really fundamentally would have changed the way we did business. And so that decision was very difficult. I lost my whole life savings. I lost the life savings of a lot of people that I love. And it was a really long journey back to, I'm going to just call it sort of back to normal, back to baseline, right? Um, and it destroyed a lot of friendships. It destroyed my family. It destroyed my finances. It, it's hard. Being an entrepreneur is hard anyway. Being a founder and a CEO is hard, but then you add all those other things and it's hard. And in that process, I kept waiting to feel resilient because that's the
Mm,
whole definition, right? You go through the most horrible situation, you lose everything. I was like waiting for somebody to show up at my door and give me this plaque of honor and say, "Here, you've earned this merit badge of resilience." Um, but it didn't happen. And I
mm,
was like, well, either the definition is wrong or I failed.
mm,
And I
mm,
started to think, I think the definition is wrong because nothing happened to me. Look
mm,
at all the things that I intentionally created out of that, right? And I became very in demand through that process, which really
mm,
surprised me. I thought I had
mm,
failed, but
mm,
instead I didn't.
mm,
So I think that
mm.
sort of started this journey of helping people realize that you got to know your non-negotiables. You have to know how to articulate and rise like a phoenix. And so I thought, okay, this is sort of the beginning of rethinking what this all means.
So, what did you realize in that shift? The moment you realized that, oh, this is not happening to me, this
Yeah.
happened through me.
Yeah. I think, and this is the framework that I now talk about in the keynote. It's a slightly different keynote than you had heard before. But I think I realized, I mean, it's this framework I called the three R's. So it's reflect, repeat, and replace. So I
Mm,
mean, I really reflected on why I made this decision to purposefully put myself in this horrible situation. But you reflect on a lot of things. What are my values? What are my priorities? What are my who am I? What do I bring to the table? So a lot of reflection and then repeat. This is the micro moments. This is how you build that muscle memory, right? Of resilience, of who you are. And then replace. Replace is where you replace, well, not just that reactive resilience with intentional resilience, but you replace anything that's not serving you anymore. And so it's a very intentional, very deliberate process through these micro moments. And as I did it, and I realized I'm now doing work I love, only with people I love, who only have great value systems, and my life is amazing now, right? And I think as I saw that, I thought, okay, this is sort of an approach I want to share with more people so that they
mm.
don't feel broken.
So it was kind of reverse engineering,
Yeah, totally it was. Yes.
where you figured out you were not actually broken through this. You had come out on the other side stronger, and it wasn't because you pushed through it. You
Totally.
you
Learn through it.
you learned through it, and there were some micro moments which you were probably unintentionally,
Yes.
because it was part of your system, because you talked about, you decided to close the company because there was a mismatch in values. So perhaps that work, the self work, was already done or was in place.
And you need to know it ahead of time. It's that's why you have to wear your seatbelt. That's why you have to have a life jacket in the boat, right? You're right too, though, because I think that that work has to be done, and then that reflection is really important. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is such a powerful story. So
Yeah.
how do you have kind of a trajectory? I've written the book, and how do you take this forward?
Yeah, it's It is. I'm already working on the next one, which I think is a little crazy. We started it the very next day after this one was released. Because I have so many ideas. There's so much in this little noggin that I can't get out. But so
Would you share yet or not yet? No.
I
Mm.
not quite. It's
Okay.
just not
Okay.
quite fle I mean, it's fleshed. No, but I will. I will come back. We'll talk about the next one. It's really cool. But
Wow.
wait. Oh, your question was how do you share it? Yeah, so a lot of keynotes, I'm averaging like four a week.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and so speaking to thousands of people each month, and then workshops, so big corporate workshops. And one of the ones that's really, really popular right now is called the Circle of Control. And I think this is really interesting because you'll take a challenge statement. Sometimes we'll go in with one, and sometimes we'll come up with them on the fly during this. Um, I mean, I'll just give you an example. So it might be like, hey, our profit margins are being squeezed because of tariffs and economic, instability, or clients want us to automate more with AI, and so it's putting pressure on. And we'll list all the things that impact those situations or those challenge statements. And then we sort them into three buckets. Here's what you can control. That means if you can directly impact it, it's in your control. If you can influence it through conversations, alignments, whatever it is, that goes in
Mm.
influence. But if you can't, it's noise. And that goes in the third bucket. And that means stop thinking about it. Don't let it burn you out. And it's very liberating to see. A lot of times people will say, well, there's more in control than you realize. But actually, there's actually a lot more noise than you realize. So once you start to see, we'll do it on post-its or whatever, and you start to actually move things. And once you start to see what you cannot control, then you don't let it take up space. And then we actually then layer on, okay, let's reflect. Where are you spending the most headspace and the most time and the time on your calendar and all that stuff? Okay, great. Let's never spend time on the noise. And then what are the micro moments where you can strengthen what you can control and influence? And then how can you start replacing if you find that you're reacting or spending a lot of time on that noise bucket, what are some moments or replacement techniques so that you're no longer burning out on noise? It's a very empowering thing. You can do it either individually at the group level or the leadership level. I'm I'm tapped out. Like I got those booked out into Q3 because they're very powerful to sort of help return kind of like empowerment and agency so people aren't spinning.
And that sense of control,
Yeah. Yes.
which we all want, especially
Yeah.
organizations and teams. I'm imagining your teams. What do they have to say after this?
I think there's a sense of relief,
Mhm.
actually, because I think right now, I mean, you brought this up earlier, right? There's AI, there's like what's going to happen. I feel like we all feel like there's so much that we are not grabbing and controlling. And to name it and say, you know what? You're right. You can't control that. Let's name it. But did you realize that this is actually in your control? Why are you spending your time here? Or okay, but this is influence. So maybe we should spend a little time learning how to influence. There's a lot of power in naming and categorizing and letting go.
And I can imagine the exercise itself is building so much resilience.
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Wow, wow. What are some of the challenges you see currently in the organizations? Where are they stuck?
So I think we're in such reactive. We have been reactive. I mean, this probably goes back to the pandemic, but even before that, right? So do you see this too? That there's just we're stuck in a reactive mode, right?
Yeah, it is that things are coming again. Like you were talking about the individual coming to them, right? And responding to that or reacting to that. I think organizations is exactly the same. Things are coming to them. And seems like we've lost the ability to strategize and even build long-term visions because human minds have now become wired to reels, Insta reels and
Totally.
YouTube
Our
reels.
attention span is so short. And I think that this is significantly impacting our competitive advantage as individuals and companies. And so, where I think this really impacts too is innovation. So, I think there's a direct correlation between intentional resilience and innovation.
Mm.
Because you're right, if we're always in reactive mode, so can I show you something?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
brought a
yeah.
prop.
I
So
want to see. Yeah,
So this is in the book, but just to
yeah.
see it. So I always I bring these to every keynote and I actually throw them out into the audience and people like they to touch them is really cool. But think about innovation. I'm going to come back to this in one second, but think about where innovation traditionally comes from. It's usually a reaction to a negative external pressure, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Regulators need you to do something, or your biggest competitor is doing something, so you've got to change your business model or your product or even like economic pressure, so your margins are being impacted. It's very rare to just proactively innovate because, to your point, we don't have the time, we don't have
Yeah,
the
yeah,
headspace. So, I mean, very large companies with huge budgets might have an innovation lab,
yeah.
but not most companies. And so
Agreed. Yeah.
I have what's called an orphan disease. It means there's fewer than 200,000 people in the country. I don't make enough digestive enzymes. So for 20 years, I've been receiving every 3 weeks this medicated shipment with ice packs. There's
Uh-huh.
so many ice packs, you have to throw them out, right?
Yeah.
And about a year ago, the ice packs all changed. And some
Uh-huh.
of them were green, and some of them said, so it says, compostable, and
Uh-huh.
some said, just cut me open and feed me to your plants. And I was like, wait, hold on. Like, this is not what you usually see in an ice pack, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I reached out to the company. It's called Pelton Shepherd. It's a
Uh-huh.
50-year-old family-owned company, and I said, I gotta talk to your CEO because this is really cool.
Yeah, yeah,
And I interviewed him for the book, and he said, look, we didn't have to do this. This was not
yeah,
a reaction to anything. This was
yeah.
just innovating because it's the right thing to do. We Our values are do the right thing for the planet, do the right thing for our customers, and we keep iterating. And I thought there's a connection between intentional resilience and intentional innovation. They are not reacting. They're just they're curious. They're, this is a huge competitive advantage.
And going back to their values, if they've done that initial work on grounding themselves, what's important to us? We
They
want to
have total
protect the
clarity, right? And
yeah,
conviction. And just think of like their customers are thrilled. Yes, their employees are thrilled because they're living their values. And so I think to answer your question, like if more companies could just have this kind of clarity and so this doesn't take you away from your core business, but it's a bit of a parallel path too. Like what is possible? What else could we do? Why
yeah.
does this matter? And now, so, like, I literally am, I tell this story to tens of thousands of people, and everybody goes, "Oh my God, that's amazing."
And I would assume that a lot of people are reaching out to them because they'd want to do the right thing. If the values align, then the companies say, oh, I do this kind of packing too. And we are now using something which goes into waste. Why wouldn't I
Totally.
do this,
Yeah,
as well?
yeah,
That's so wonderful. So
yeah, yeah.
if someone who is listening to you wants to start cultivating resilience right today, where would they begin?
I think you could begin by just asking yourself some simple questions, right? So, just as an example, you could ask yourself, do I react or do I respond? Right? That's a that's a question. I mean, I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I'll get a text or an email and like pause, just pause first. We're so primed to like, oh, let me respond, like let me get this email back, let me take this text. That's a great place to start. Just pause, right?
Mm,
Pause
mm,
and ask yourself, like, why was my gut reaction this? As
mm,
opposed to, could I take a pause, think this through, interrogate why my feelings were a certain way, and then respond in a more calm way? Or could I look at my calendar I love this one. And just take 2 to 3 meetings off a week.
Mm, mm,
And you don't have to cancel them. You could just postpone them a little bit and explain that what you're doing is you have some clarity into, your this week's priorities, you're preventing some burnouts, and you really value this meeting, but you're just going to push it out a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
Just those micro moments that they fuel yourself, they give you a little more headspace. You're not apologizing for any of this, but you're just being really intentional about how you use your energy and your time.
Mm, mm. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's about also unlearning some of the habits that we have formed and relearning to be in these micro moments. Keep practicing them till the brain starts to recognize them as rewired as new neural networks.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's even something as simple as, I've had so many people say to me, gosh, I never like stop to document the wins,
Yeah.
right? I document the bad stuff or whatever. Just take 30 seconds every day and write down the good stuff. Good for
Mm-hmm.
your brain, but it's also good for your career, right? Like it's good, but it's a habit that you need to build into yourself. Here's another very simple example, and this kind of comes from the curiosity. I was with an executive team, and someone said, oh, he says, I get so frustrated. In my group meetings and my one-on-ones, I always say, hey, everything going? How's everything going? Oh, good, good, good. He said, and then a month later, all the wheels fall off the bus. Things were not good. Now we're missing deadlines, but I asked everybody. And one of his peers said, oh, well, I actually asked that question differently. I say, what is 1 to 3 things I can help you with this week? And just that small change of phrase, sometimes people say, oh, no, 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 there's nothing. I'm good. And they're truly good. But that opens the aperture to say, there's one thing actually, blah, 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 blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. And he said, now I can put out the fire instantly and we stay on track. So just think about how could you rephrase something?
Yeah, I am going to write this down. What are
Yeah.
1 to 3 things I can help you with? Again,
Hmm.
that question is specifically asking for, tell me, tell me.
Right? It's safe. I actually want to know because, how's everything going? Sounds like I don't really want to know.
Yeah,
How you
yeah,
doing? As opposed to like, I want a real emotional check-in right now.
yeah. Tell
Yeah.
me. You
Yeah.
do this work with leaders and organizations, which is so much needed. But I'm thinking that this starts with children in schools and with parents, sometimes still teaching them the old definition of resilience. Have you thought of uh,
It's so
how,
interesting.
how to
It's
get there?
so interesting you said that because I don't have children. And after the first few times I gave the keynote, I had a few people reach out and say, this has helped me with my parenting. Like with my little kids, I'm saying, was this a reaction or a response? And I was like, oh my God, that was parenting advice. But yeah, just think that next generation, right? We have to this is a leadership legacy, right? And if we can really help, I think, especially with that idea, nothing's happening to you. There's no victims here. Let's really think about anything that you might be offended by or upset by. Let's shift that. What can we learn from this? How can we reframe this? I think that would be really powerful. Let's learn how to have hard conversations. We've never had more generations in the workplace. If we can use some of this to ease the friction and create more resilient children who will become the next generation of leaders, there's no downsides, right?
Isn't it? Isn't it? Some of
Yeah,
your work in the corporate will become easier.
I think so. Yeah, yeah,
Because there's so much unlearning of the past.
definitely. But don't you think you work with senior leaders? I think even people who've reached the pinnacle, there's some room for helping them have better conversations and being more on it, like, being a little bit more forthright. I think this all the way from the youngest to the most senior leaders, there's a lot of room for a lot of people to learn things.
Which is great for us.
Totally. Totally. Anyone who's like, no, 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 I'm good. I got all my skills. I'm like, okay, okay,
Yeah, that's fine too.
totally.
Is there anything else you'd want to leave the listeners and viewers with?
I just think like this is not daunting, right? I'm not asking anyone or suggesting that anyone sort of do something that's so onerous, right? Every single person is already resilient. This is something we all have. If we're alive, we have it, right? This is just I'm, I'm just trying to encourage people, I think, to shift from the one kind that we've all been sort of primed and taught, which
Yeah.
is that bounce back model, grit, power through. We're just shifting what you already have and what you've already learned to a new kind, to just a different way of thinking about it, which is intentional, just to build it as a muscle. So it's really maybe not as big a shift as you might think. And you don't have to eat the elephant whole. You can literally start doing this in just the littlest bits so that over the next few months or year or whatever, you can eventually replace this reactive way of thinking or living. You never have to live in that model again.
Mhm.
So eventually you can make these decisions with so much confidence. You can be in this pressure cooker environment, which we're all in. Um, I think you can turn pressure into power and have more energy, and you can do it in a pretty easy way. I don't know, to me that sounds like a pretty big upside, you know?
It is, pressure into power. And it's not, the formula is not that complicated. It is micro moments which kind of add up to create a mind shift.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's sort of my plea to people is like, wouldn't it be nice to not feel pressured, but to feel powerful? Yeah, we are all powerful.
And it will feel nice to feel that way.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this conversation, Tissa, and helping us rethink on what resilience is and what can it look like.
Thank you.
And
Yes, and I do these as keynotes and as workshops, so you know, just feel free to reach out.
sure, and I'm also inviting our audience to get the book, Rethinking Resilience, Fueling Your Competitive Advantage. It's everywhere where the books are sold,
Mhm.
and it has a lot of tactical tools and wisdom for anyone who is leading through these complex times. So thank you, Tissa, for being here
Thank
with
you.
us.
It's so good to see you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
In a world obsessed with speed and production, the most transformational leaders are the ones who know how to slow down. For no matter what world you lead, whether it's a workplace, a family, or a community, there is a way to command respect, a deeper way to show up. So discover the Mindful Leadership Lab, an immersive workshop where you'll learn to connect clearly, lead calmly, and gain respect, and embody presence as a daily leadership skill. So learn more at anuarora.com. That's ANUARORA.com. And take the first step towards leading with presence and power.